anyone willing to share? Anyone willing to be brave and share? Anyone willing to share about a time when a mentor of some sort let them down and how they reacted? Got my plans in the back.
Yeah. If you need me, here I am.
You play talk show host. Thank you, Oprah. No, so, okay. Really good on talk show. So for me, I used to be a newspaper reporter, and a couple of years ago, the newspaper published a series of articles that really set off firestorm in the community. I wasn't, the writer of those articles. I wasn't really part of how it all happened, but the community really lashed out against the whole newspaper. And there were, letters being sent and harassing phone calls and nasty emails and all of that. And the top editors, they really didn't come to the aid of all of us in the newsroom. They kind of viewed themselves as the vanguard of journalism. They were pioneers. This was an important story. And they didn't really see the fact that all of us who were reporters, all of us who were a little bit lower on the totem pole, felt really scared and felt unsafe. And for me, it felt like the people who I viewed as mentors and viewed as teachers were not there for us when it counted. I felt like the sort of scenes were laid bare. I didn't like what I saw. And in terms of what the effects were, I ended up getting into a different industry. I do nonprofit communications now, but it just felt like you see your leaders, you see your mentors in a certain way, and then you're surprised, in an unhappy way. Thank you, stranger. Anyone else willing to share a little bit? All right, great.
This is going way back, but I remember when we were in high school, and our friends were the Christians who were trying to, Catholics who would come up to you and try to, quote your Bible and say, okay, what are you Jews doing about this? And as teenagers, we had no idea. There was nothing we could use to go back against, and they knew their Bible. So what a bunch of us kids did is we went to the local rabbi, not in this area, out of state, nowhere at, but we went to the rabbi and said, what do we do? Help us be able to protect ourselves and respond to this. And the rabbi was above us and said, don't worry about it. It just was not helpful at all.
That's great. So, not great, but it's a great sharing. So we'll do one last one. So far we have a story of a leader who was able to step up and sort of take the hit for the followers, or a leader who was not able to sort of get down to the level of the followers and gain themselves, that they took the question as beneath their dignity, it sounds like. All right, last one.
That's why I came up with the question. Yeah. So, as some of you may know, I came from a very Orthodox background. I went to the yeshiva at the afternoon school, and I will never forget that it was around the time of Sukkot, and I shook the lulav in joy. I wasn't trying to hurt the lulav, I shook it. And the rabbi at the time, long black beard, said to me, you could have broken the tips of it, because the very top of the lulav can't be shattered, separate from the pit mission. And he said, I want you to write on the blackboard 200 times, I, Susie Butcher-Mofitz, will never shake the lulav too hard. So this was my rabbi, right, who kind of took the joy out of my emotion, and that was something that just sat for him.
All right, so note to self, don't make congregants write on the blackboard 200 times, anything. Okay, so we're going to move on, hopefully after we'll have more time to share. So we're going to look at the first text on this sheet, and hopefully by the end of this, if I've done my job, you'll get why I started Operation Girl. Does I want me to read? Is there a volunteer who's willing to read a little bit in English? In the back. Okay.
Adonai spoke to Moses, get yourself down, for your people who will be brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely. They have been quick to turn aside from the way that I enjoined upon them. They have made themselves a molten calf and bowed low to it and sacrificed to it, saying, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Okay, pause for 1 second. So we all know the parsha we're in. We're in the issue of the golden calf. God is pretty upset about this. And this line is going to be important because it's going to be interpreted very differently by the rabbis. But in this context, when God says get down, what does he mean? Go back down the mountain. Go back down the mountain.
You're up here hanging out with me, but meanwhile, notice when he says your people, as if they're not God's people, they're your people. Moses, your people. It's like when a parent, when one parent argues with the other, it's like, your kids caused this problem. They're your kids also. Right? So God says, your people, who you brought out from the land of Egypt. God had nothing to do with it, apparently. Moses have acted basely. Right? They have messed up. They've turned away from the path that I have enjoined upon them. Okay, so again, someone else to read the next paragraph, please. This is Moses' reply to God.
We're just making you walk back and forth.
It's good exercise. I ate a lot of
Adonai further said to Moses, I see that this is a stiff-necked people. Now let me be, that my anger may blaze forth against them, and that I may destroy them and make you a great nation. But Moses implored Adonai his God, saying, let not your anger, Adonai, blaze forth against your people, whom you have delivered from the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand. Let not the Egyptians say, it was with evil intent that God delivered them, only to kill them off in the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth. Turn from your blazing anger and renounce your plan to punish your people. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and how you swore to them by yourself and said to them, I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and I will give to your offspring this whole land of which I spoke to possess forever. And Adonai renounced the punishment God had planned to bring upon God's people.
Great. Okay, so Moses' intervention has worked, and God is going to back off and not destroy the Israelites. What were the arguments that he used here to convince God?
Well, one that he took them out of Egypt. Was he just going to take them out and then annihilate them later on?
Right, he just took them out, what, to kill them in the desert? I mean, this is sort of the origin of the phrase Shanda for the Goyim, right? Like, they're going to see that you destroyed your own people, and what are they going to think of you? It's sort of this very self-serving argument for God. It's like, God, you don't want to look bad in front of everyone else. And what's the other argument he uses? The promise, right? The promise, which was, you'll be fruitful, multiply, your offspring, make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the heaven. Right, so one is, don't do this because it looks really bad as your PR person. I'm telling you this is bad press. And number two is you made a commitment to the Israelites and to their ancestors, and you can't break your contract. Is there another strategy? I saw another hand in the back.
Yeah, well, it's a blend, but he's also saying, if you do this, then you're basically playing into the hands of the Egyptians from whom you delivered the people, and you're giving them a weapon to say, see, your God is not your protector. You need to stay with us, and we can, manipulate you. You're better off being enslaved and doing what we're doing, or the enemies of the Jewish people can use God's vengeance against the Jewish people.
That's exactly right. Right, and the entire point of the whole Exodus thing that just happened not so long ago in the Torah is that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. Right, that's sort of the whole point, is that the enemies understand that Pharaoh is not God, but God is God. And so this would sort of defeat the purpose, because then God would destroy God's people, and the Egyptians would say, see, this guy is not so great. And there is no point to them leaving, and the Israelites, if there are any left, might say there's no point to us leaving Egypt at all. Yeah. To the future, right. So saying, by reminding God of the offspring, Moses is reminding God this story needs to continue. And if you kill them now, there's no rest of the story. Also, notice how the blame is being apportioned here. Right, so at the beginning is right. God says to Moses, Moses, your people have messed up. And when Moses returns, it's all about, let not your anger blaze forth. He says, remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right, it's sort of this back and forth about whose people are these and who's responsible for them. Right, who is their leader? So God, sort of in a moment of anger, says to Moses, you messed this up. These are your people. And then Moses comes back and says, actually, you have a responsibility for these people. You need to step up and be their leader.
Moses seems to be admonishing God for his anger and impulsiveness.
Yes, it is odd that Moses is admonishing God for his anger and impulsiveness when Moses himself has an anger management problem that comes up later in the Torah. Right, it's an odd dynamic, but they have to rely on each other. I mean, like, in they're a team in this in some ways. Obviously, there's a senior partner and a junior partner, but they're a team. Last one, then we move on to the next one.
Second to the English translation in the last sentence. And Adonai renounced the punishment of God and planned to bring upon God's people.
That's just my gender politics, right? I didn't want to use he because God is not male or female, and so God's pronoun is God. And that's my translation. But good for noticing. Okay, so we're going to read, I'll read the next little piece. Right, so in between the little dot, Moses went down the mountain, Moses smashed the tablets, they destroyed the calf, and he makes the Israelites drink the calf dissolved in the water. And then, and in that moment, Moses is yelling at the people and sort of turning his wrath on the people, and then he goes back up to God again to try and make sure that atonement has been fully accomplished. So the next day, Moses said to the people, "You have been guilty of a great sin, yet now I will go up to Adonai. Perhaps I may win forgiveness for your sin." Moses went back to Adonai and said, "Alas, this people is guilty of a great sin in making themselves a god of gold. Now if you will forgive their sin, then well and good. But if not, erase me from the record which you have written." But Adonai said to Moses, "He who has sinned against me, him only will I erase from my record. Go now, lead the people where I told you. See, my angel shall go before you, but when I make an accounting, I will bring them to account for their sins." So God's answer isn't you're all off the hook. God's answer is the ones who are really the most guilty will be punished. But what's the strategy here that Moses employs this last time to make sure that God does not change God's mind and destroy the people? What's the final card that he pulls?
Don't punish them, punish me.
Right. Don't punish them. If you're going to punish them, you have to punish me first. I'm willing to step up and to take the brunt of the punishment because I am the leader of this people. Okay. That's the shot. That's the sort of the surface level. And we're going to look at two more texts that I think sort of bring us a little bit deeper into some more of the complexity of this major change. Okay? So this next one's from the Talmud, from Masechet Brachot, and it's going to be doing a little bit of a creative reading of this phrase, "get yourself down." Right? Left, red, go get down. Can I get a volunteer to read the Talmud? Right. Not the whole Talmud, just.
And Adonai spoke to Moses, "Get yourself down." Rabbi Eliezer said, "The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moses, 'Moses, go down from your greatness. I only gave you greatness for the sake of Israel. Now that Israel has sinned, what do I want you for?' Immediately Moses became powerless, and he lacked even the strength to speak. However, when God said, 'Let me alone that I may destroy them,' Moses said to himself, 'This depends upon me.' Immediately he stood up and prayed vigorously and begged for mercy. It was like the case of a king who became angry with his son and began beating him severely. His friend was sitting before him, but was afraid to say a word until the king said, 'Were it not for my friend here who is sitting before me, I would kill you.' He said, 'This depends on me.' And immediately he stood up and rescued him."
Thank you. So first of all, how are they sort of drashing? How are they interpreting the verse, "get down"? Get off your high horse, kind of, right? Not literally get down from the mountain, but God is saying, I only brought you up, metaphorically speaking, and put you in a position of power for the sake of the Israelites. And you're hanging up here with me, and they are causing big problems. So get off your high horse and go fix it, right? It's a creative sort of twist on that very sort of literal get down from the mountain. So in this text, in addition to that sort of play on words, who is it that wants to save the people here? Yeah, I'm hearing mostly Moses. I'm hearing a little bit of God too. So someone who thinks God is the one who wants to save the people. So why do you think God is the one who wants to save the people here?
I think he's giving Moses an out.
Giving Moses an out.
It wasn't an absolute, it was, let's discuss this.
Right. It was sort of like a let's discuss. I read this even further of like, when God says, "Leave me alone that I may destroy them," it's like when someone wants to get in a fight and go, hold me back, really, hold me back, don't let me fight, hold me back, right? God is saying, "Leave me alone that I may destroy them," and according to this Talmudic source, it's not God saying, "Really leave me alone." It's God saying, sort of, if you leave me alone, then I'm going to destroy them. So you need to pull yourself together. This moment when Moses sort of faces the wrath of God, literally speaking. And he loses his power and becomes powerless and he cannot speak. He's sort of brought low by the circumstances. It's a moment where a leader facing a very difficult situation literally finds himself speechless and powerless. Happens all the time. And it's God saying, leave me alone that I may destroy them, that sort of finds sort of way to motivate Moses to understand that he needs to step up in the situation. That he needs to actually be a leader. And that if he doesn't step up, and I don't know, from this text, I mean, it doesn't seem 100% clear that God really wants to destroy the people, but more that God is looking for a way out of destroying the people. Right? That's my reading. Anyone else? Yes.
Well, it strikes me as absurd.
Absurd, okay.
I don't think we can infer that from, except by looking at this text by itself. But looking at text in general, let's say, God continually presents himself in role play in ways that are comical, in ways that are absurd. And I don't mean to put down by saying that that's absurd. I mean it's intentionally absurd to suggest that God doesn't observe the people. You take the responsibility. You take possession of this duty. It's not mine alone for this part.
Right, it's a rhetorical device, sort of. God is putting on a show of absurdity to say, right, to sort of exaggerate the situation to push Moses into taking action. Right, great, thank you. Any other thoughts about this? Okay, so we're going to look at one more take on this one. I think this one it takes it in an even different direction. This is a more modern text from the Maggid of Mezritch. There, he's one of the first disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidut, the Hasidic movement, 18th century in Poland. And he's going to sort of extemporaneous and drash on this story. And he's going to use it as a way to talk about leadership and the relationship between leaders and followers. I'll read a little bit. Look, he says, Hine, behold, all Israel is like a single body. The great among them are called the heads of the community. The average ones are called the limbs, each person according to their level. The lesser ones are called the legs. So you're making a metaphor here, right? The leaders are the thinkers who are sort of directing things, and everyone else has their sort of place in the body. And it's not a democracy. Everyone's not equal according to this metaphor, but everyone is interconnected. Right? Which I think even in a democracy, there are some people who have more power than others. So I think this is a really useful metaphor for thinking about community. So then he continues. He says, look, if a person has, God forbid, a headache, I love the little, God forbid anyone should have a headache, but that's how he writes it. Chas v'shalom, right? God forbid, heaven forbid someone has a headache, then all of their limbs are useless and weigh them down because the body follows after the head. Right? Who here has ever been in this situation? Like your head hurts, but why can't you walk? Why can't you get up and do stuff? Well, it's because you can't function without your head. You can't function when your head goes bad. You're interconnected. But if the feet hurt, then the pain still reaches them. Even though their head is not made completely useless, their mind is not as clear as it ought to be, right? It's the reverse. Even though the head is in charge, if you stub your toe, God forbid, heaven forbid, or you break your leg, heaven forbid, or whatever, then it impacts the head. It impacts the way you think, it changes the way you act. You can't just, pain is not something that goes away because you're connected to your body at all times. So this is called the mashal is the parable, and the nimshal is the explanation. So too with all Israel, if, heaven forbid, the tzaddik, the righteous one, the rebbe, the Hasidic rabbi, the person in charge, if the tzaddik, who is the head, falls from their high spiritual level, even a tiny hair's worth, then they are the cause, heaven forbid, of the great sins of the masses commit. Right? If the leader has a momentary slip up, even a hair's worth, and descends from their high spiritual level even a little bit, it can cause repercussions to the rest of the body and the rest of the people. And we've all seen this to be true in different ways. When a leader makes a small mistake, it can have ripple effects. And so too the opposite. If the masses are sinning, then And just like when a person has a great pain in their foot, their head also suffers a little bit. They're causing their tzaddik, their leader, to fall from their level a little bit. So we have this sort of relationship, this dynamic relationship between leaders and followers, where you need each other. Anyone ever experienced anything like this in their communities of any type? Where a leader makes a mistake and it affects the rest, or where the masses are making some sort of mistake and it is causing the leader to suffer? Want to share a little bit?
We had such an incident in the Czech Senate. Leaders made a decision and then she was over the measure and had terrible implications.
Right. And what about the reverse? What about the reverse, where not necessarily leader, but anywhere, where even at work or a family where sort of not the head but the feet are making some sort of mistake or some issue, and it's causing problems for the head. Anyone here, boss of an organization, ever get any service from your employees?
One everybody can relate to, okay. People in DEQ made some terrible mistakes, and now Snyder, the governor, is paying the price for it.
Right. Right. Exactly. He didn't do anything himself as well. I don't know. Maybe, but this happens all over the place where an employee down the ladder will make a mistake, and then the person who's in charge has to take responsibility for it. And even if they don't get fired or anything, it gives them a headache. You know, it distracts them from being able to do their job in the right way. So you can see this dynamic of being symbiotic between leaders and followers works in both directions. It's not just top down, and it's not just bottom up. So now we're going to take it back to the story, okay? He continues, look, the moment that Israel made the calf, they caused Moses up above to descend from his level. But Moses, out of his great humility, decided that the matter had not begun with them, but rather it was his fault. Right? So the reality of the situation, the people make a big mistake with the calf. Moses is affected by it spiritually in some way, but because he's such a humble guy, he says that it must be that I messed up, and in my failure of leadership, the people descended to a lower level where they thought that worshiping the golden calf was a good idea. This is why Moses said, and if not, erase me. Right? Remember when Moses steps up and says, punish me first? He says to God, says, I am the one who is responsible for causing them to do this. Right? Moses, his moment of stepping up comes out of his great humility, according to this text. For this reason, the Holy Blessed One answered him by saying, it's certainly possible that the beginning of this incident was because of you. Right? Maybe, God said, maybe it is your fault. Maybe you messed up somehow along the way. You had some small failure of leadership that had repercussions that ended up in the golden calf. But then God says it could also be because of them. Maybe they just messed up. You, Moses, are but flesh and blood. You cannot know this. But I know the depths of the heart, and the secret things are revealed to me. I know who began this, and who sinned against me. I will punish those amongst you who began this. God answered him well, according to Moses' understanding. So what is God's reply to Moses in a nutshell? I'm willing to summarize it for you. What is God saying about leadership and about Moses' responsibility or lack thereof?
Roll with the punches, but be positive.
What's that?
Roll with the punches, but be positive.
Roll with the punches, but be positive. So, rolling with the punches, meaning you don't always know if it's your fault or if it's someone else's fault, but be positive. Okay. Yes.
Also, at times you are just flesh and blood, you are not a God.
Mm.
And it is human sometimes to err some way, but you correct it.
Right.
That's your duty as a leader, is to make up for what you should have done and didn't, and get people straight.
Right, you're just flesh and blood. You can't be perfect all the time. And I'll take it even further. You're just flesh and blood, and you don't always know if you as the leader are at fault, or if the people that you're following are at fault. You can't always know because the relationship is so So we don't always know who's at fault. All we know is that we are responsible to each other, depend on each other, leaders and followers.
But actually, is it the time, can I ask a question about it?
Yeah, sure.
In this bottom text where it says that you're flesh and blood and you're not God, and I, God, know the secret things that are revealed to me. So in that context, which jives with what we would understand God to be and know, God knows that the people are going to sin and do this. Why does he let them?
Why does God let the people make their sin? We're in theology, we're beyond theology 101 and into 201. Rabbi Starr, you an answer? Yeah, I mean,
You're planted.
right. I think freedom of choice, right, and that's sort of the basic things. We'll talk more later. But we'll come over here and then I'll come back.
I think when you're a leader, the buck stops with you. And so even though somebody who is on your team or who is in your employ makes a mistake, makes an error, insults somebody, and it obviously comes to the person at the top, then you have to take some of the responsibility for that because of your position, even though you may not have had any part in causing whatever the problem was.
Right. That's great.
One last comment and then we'll wrap up. And we can drill in.
At the same time, the leader should remember that you can't stop everything. Some leaders actually get so full of themselves that they think people will follow. So it's a reminder that even the great leaders need to be humble.
Right.
Even in shared setting.
Bring us home.
This text disappoints me because I started respecting it. The more I read it, the more I questioned how the speaker gets away with presuming to sit in judgment on the adequacy of God's arguments to Moses. It seems that he presumes to be a critic of God's arguments and to have an understanding of his own superior to that of Moses. This strikes me as not terribly convincing.
Okay. All right, last one. Okay. Great.
It just seems to me as if God is playing games.
Interesting. Interesting. So I totally respect that, and I will admit that Hasidic teachings are notorious for going against the grain of the text, and they're notorious for being willing to criticize figures in the Tanakh that otherwise might seem to be flawless, and that they're willing to twist and turn the story to make a point about leadership or about something else. So. Personally, I understand, I think, your dislike for the text, and I think that's why. I don't disagree with your reasoning, but that's why I like it. I like it that the author of the text, Dovber, is the Maggid of Mezrich, is willing to say, I have a place in this story, and I have an ability to play with the text and to twist it and to understand it in different ways than maybe were on the surface. But sort of beyond the sort of textual integrity or lack thereof, I think it's saying something really important about leaders and followers. I think, essentially, I think his point is that you never really know when there's an issue in some sort of group, whether it's leadership or followers who are causing the problem. Right? That's why at the very end, when it sort of puts the words into God's mouth and has God say, "You are but flesh and blood, Moses. I know what's going on." Right? It means that none of us ever really 100% can understand in a relationship in a community where the ultimate blame really lies. But that said, Moses is still a role model for us, and even in this text, he's a role model for us, and that he errs on the side of humility. He errs on the side of humility. And even in this case, we get to peek at God's perspective, and we know, because God is a character in this text, that God knows that it's not Moses' fault. But he chooses to act with humility in a way to take the blame. And I think in organizations, in shuls, in families, in our lives, like leaning toward humility is as a leader, is the way to sort of negotiate that balance and be the best leader possible. Shabbat shalom.
questions for Rabbi Braver? Personal information about yourself, your profession, what you've been doing.
How personal do you want? I'll keep it. For those who don't know, I grew up in LA, outside of LA in a very small Jewish community. I went to a day school that was about 100 kids, very small. Sort of didn't find myself super involved in Jewish life until sort of after college, or maybe the end of college, beginning of my sort of time in living in Boston, sort of getting involved in Jewish life and synagogue activities and things like that, and sort of exploring, in addition to sort of the conservative movement stuff, also the sort of non-denominational world in Boston. And from there, I want to sort of do the abbreviated version, but I ended up going to Hadar, a sort of non-denominational egalitarian yeshiva in New York, and studied for a year there, and then on to JTS. And while I've been at JTS, I've tried to sort of, I think, talk about like the three main influences of my time at JTS. I mean, one is a passion for scholarship and learning and text that really comes very solidly from JTS, and everyone that comes out of there, I think, has that passion. The second influence is probably doing a lot of pastoral care work, doing a couple of 400-hour summer units of pastoral care working at a senior center and then at a kosher food program and social service agency, and working with people in really difficult moments of their lives, and realizing that working with people in those moments, you learn how to listen to people in every moment in deeper ways. And I think the third influence is probably working at B'nai Jeshurun, which is a big Manhattan synagogue that is close to the conservative movement in its hashkafa and its approach, but it's not technically part of the movement, and it is a lot of creativity and experimenting in terms of prayer and spirituality, and I found that willingness to go outside the box is really a really important, really critical part of what the conservative movement, I think, needs to rethink what it means to be Jewish in this century. So that's the short version.
What was your original major in school, and why did you get away from that?
My original major in school, so I was a double major history and politics. I had a lot of free time. And I wanted to do a PhD in American history, and a couple of things happened. One was my junior year, I came out of the closet, and I sort of had this moment of the path that I thought my life was supposed to take, sort of stopped, and I realized that there was more to myself and my identity than I had expected, and more than I planned. And it forced me to do a lot of rethinking about who I was and what's important to me. And I found that Jewish spaces were really the spaces that helped me in that, and that helped me to provide me with the tools to do that work, that spiritual work. And I saw that there's more to this tradition than just bar mitzvah. Bar mitzvah is great, a great bar mitzvah, but there's more beyond it. There's more learning to do. So that was my sort of the push into this work. Although at the time I still didn't want to do rabbinical school. Partly I applied to a lot of PhD programs, and I didn't get in where I wanted to go. And I was like, well, it's got to rethink things. So I didn't. Even then, it wasn't quite grabbing it. I worked at a high school for a little bit, and from there I got more and more involved in Jewish life, and sort of as it got deeper and deeper, it just felt more and more right. But that was really, I think, that work in college was sort of doing the self-exploration was really the foundation for in retrospect.
Do you have any preliminary thoughts on how Sheriff said it could be something like the B'nai Jeshurun of this region, whether it's defined locally or broadly? Way back, I think many of us know something of the reputation of the B'nai Jeshurun. Perhaps you could summarize for all of us. What is so special about this synagogue that you've been associated with? And do you see any analog between the B'nai Jeshurun and Sheriff Tzedek? And this is, you get my question?
I get it, totally. So first of all, I think that every place is unique in that even if you were to take the same leadership and the same tunes and the same programs and copy paste them here or anywhere else, it wouldn't work. So I don't think it's a matter of just sort of taking like the right ingredients and mixing them in a different place. I think a lot of it about responding to the people of a particular community, and assessing what it is they want, where they're at, where they're ahead, and also being willing as a rabbinic leader to not only be following, but also be pushing a little bit. Do these things. I want to push beyond your comfort zone a little bit and get in a little bit of debate, a little debate about the text. Like that's great. I think it's great to disagree a little bit. So I think that's a part of it is assessing sort of where the community's at and what it wants, and then being willing to push. I think sort of big picture, like what are the things that make the judgment great that I would want to bring in some way. I think part of it is a real willingness to be experimental, be creative with prayer, with tefillah. It doesn't mean violating halachic boundaries. It doesn't mean changing the structure of the service. It means a lot of it I think is musical. Being willing to try new tunes with different flair. And they bring in and not just sort of new tunes. Like one of the things I love about Bnei Jeshurun is they draw on traditional tunes that don't come from Europe. Right? So tunes from Morocco, from Spain, from Iraq, from Yemen, from parts of the Jewish world that are underrepresented in this country. So having an authentic Jewish feel, but it has a little bit of an exotic taste. I think that's a big part of it, is that sort of willingness to experiment. And I think the thing I appreciate the most about Bnei Jeshurun, and not to say that's not here, but they put meaning, I think, really at the forefront of a lot of what happens. And I think getting to a place of like being able to put people in a place of real deep meaning and providing that depth in services and in classes, and being able to touch people in that way. I think that's the core of it. And I think that's incredibly possible here. I think it's already happening in major ways, and I think I've gotten a really great taste of it at PJ, and I've gotten a really great taste of it here, and it's about being able to collaborate.
Can you talk about your involvement with APAC and J Street and how that would work? There are parents of 20-something-year-olds in this congregation, sort of going back in a way to Susie's question, where they're encountering a lot of anti-Israel sentiment. You're drawn into it. They're unclear. It's like, well, yeah, it sounds like those Palestinians are really being terribly treated, and that they come to you as a rabbi. How would your involvement is, from what I understand, in those? I don't know what your involvement is. I understand there is some. So I really wanted to raise it in this action to help me understand your thinking on those things. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Easy questions, great. Israel. So I'll say some words about APAC first. I honestly wish that J Street had done more to reach out to rabbinical students, because they really, I had some coffee dates with people and I felt like I had some involvement, but APAC really, I think, went above and beyond in terms of reaching out to rabbinical students. So I got to go on a trip to Israel about a month and a half ago, from Christmas to a couple days after New Year's, with a group of rabbis, rabbinical students from Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, all playing nicely together, and talking to in an APAC-sponsored trip, because there's no doubt, I think, in a group of rabbinical students that you're committed to the safety and security of the state of Israel. We love the place. Many of us have lived there I've lived there for almost a year. Most of the people on that trip have spent extended time in the country. And so I think because they trusted us and knew our depth of knowledge and experience and commitment to the place, they brought right-wing settler people, they brought left-wing Peace Now activists, they brought people from the Palestinian Authority, they brought in Israeli Arabs, they brought in, people from Likud, like people from labor, like the full spectrum of thought and belief in the country, and then gave us the space to process it amongst people who there's no doubt were all committed to Israel and what it stands for. So I found that to be a really amazing experience, and I am incredibly grateful to have that relationship with APAC. Anyone know Robin Pappas? Robin Pappas' son, Jeremy, is the rabbi who runs the fellowship, so he's an amazing mentor and resource. Brought into Shared Aesthetic. So that's been really an important part of my understanding of Israel. I think with J Street, a couple things. I think number one is in talking to Rabbi Pappas, he made it very clear, anyone who is involved with APAC and and anyone who's committed to the safety and security of the state of Israel, go see what's out there. Go explore. Check out J Street. Check out whatever. See the spectrum of Jewish thought, and as long as you're committed to safety and security, and you love the country and what it stands for, Zeitgesetzt. So I think that was a really helpful framework for me in understanding what APAC is about, and giving me sort of felt the freedom to explore what's out there. And I'll say beyond that, I think sort of on an instrumental level, I think for people my age, J Street is not controversial. For my demographic, for most people in my demographic, it's not controversial at all. And I think to be able to be the rabbi for all people, and especially to be the rabbi for people my age, to have some fluency in the spectrum, the broad spectrum of debate on Israel is really, really important, because if especially among people my age, I think if they get the sense that you don't sort of understand the lingo, and you're not willing to take some critique and take some criticism, then they won't want to engage. So I think for my rabbinic training, I think I want to be able to hold all people, as long as they have a sort of baseline love and respect for what Israel is. That helps me be a better rabbi for them. So that was my guiding principle in this work.
What is your experience with children and younger people, like in their 20s and between 20 and 30? We have plenty of old people here. But we would like to get to see more young people and your experience with the children.
Sure. So, experience with children and young people. So I think a big piece of my experience, and something I enjoyed immensely at Nadesh, I've told this story a couple of times, so sorry for those who've heard it, but I was sitting in the office at BJ, and Rabbi Marshall Bronstein comes up to me and says, "What are you doing in 2 or 3 weeks?" And classes and doing all the things that you told me to do. And he said, "You want to go to the Dominican Republic with me and 20 teenagers?" And all right, I'll clear my schedule. Let's do this. Working with teens, especially on sort of service trips, on sort of immersive Jewish experiences that take them beyond the synagogue walls and engage them in sort of relating Judaism to their values in really deep ways, and being able to wake up and have a service and then go do some service work, prayer service, and then do service work, and then process it through a Jewish lens with Jewish text, and then go out and explore the city. And that level of engagement, I think, gave me a really interesting window into the mind of Jewish teens. And I think one of the main things I learned, I think, was teenagers want to be able to express themselves. They want to be able to insert themselves into the tradition. They want to be able to argue with it. They want to be able to challenge it. They want to be able to share their opinions. And making more space for them is only good, because it tells them that can be contained, and that's actually a part of what being Jewish is. That's with teenagers, I think. And sort of, that was more with like 10th, 11th, 12th graders. I did a little bit of work in Brotherhood Group, Moving Tradition, which is sort of a national organization that does post bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah youth groups. And so working with small groups, my group is 9th and 10th graders. And so having discussions about issues that are relevant to them, and again, bringing in relevant Jewish sources of text in addition to playing games and being dumb and silly and making stupid jokes and letting them run around and be wild a little bit, and also integrating that into a conversation about Jewish values. I think with younger and younger kids, I did a decent amount of work with Minyan Bet, a sort of a K-2 little kids service on Saturday mornings. So being able to dance and sing and be silly with them, and be able to sort of take the Parsha and act it out in a way that's kind of silly and fun, and also was not ignoring that their parents are there. And someone called it like the Disney Pixar effect, It's like even adults like watching Up and cry, right? But like the kids are engaged also. So I think that's sort of my guiding principle for working with kids, is not to ignore the parents that are not with them.
What ideas might you have about drawing in young families, and what types of activities would you use to implement an expanded congregation that's vibrant?
Young families. So there's a lot of angles to this. I think the primary angle, is about relationship building. I think, again, as especially among sort of folks in their 20s and 30s, I think there's not as much of a draw to joining an institution just because it's an institution. There's a draw to joining an institution either because it provides a service that you need, or because you have a relationship with someone there that feels like it's genuine and real. So one way into this is having relationships, to be out in the field, having coffee with people, to be willing to meet people on their own terms, and to learn their names better. Try to learn names, but there's a lot of names. But I think it's really, really important. Just like that alone is enough, I think, to establish a bit of a relationship, and being willing to invest significant time in relationship building and getting out of the office. I think is one way to sort of engage people. And I think the other one, in terms of providing services that people want, is being willing in those meetings, being willing to listen and understand it, and just to say bluntly, what is it that you need? What is it in the door? What is it you're looking for? Like, what barriers are there that we're not seeing? Sometimes it takes an outside perspective, and not just outside perspective, but someone, like, if you're willing to present yourself as someone who's willing to hear the critique, and then be willing to fix it. So I think those are sort of the two angles for young families.
I don't think I need the mic. When you were at Brandeis, as there is now, I'm fairly certain that there was an official linkage with Al-Quds University in Palestine. And I wonder if it was something that you or your friends or people that you knew embraced, and how it fit in, and whether you thought that folks at Brandeis were self-selected to be of a certain point of view, or if that just happened, or did it, or is there anything you can say about the Brandeis experience?
Right. I'll say I love Brandeis. I'll also say, I mean, I was way less involved in Jewish life and Israel, I think, involvement like at that period of my life, so I wasn't so plugged in at that moment. There was a big explosion of the Al-Quds stuff. I think it was like, either my senior year or right after I graduated, so I don't know all the details. I know there was like some really terrible things that about Al-Quds and the relationship was broken. I think at Brandeis, I think there was, like, in terms of the most controversial Israel thing that happened at Brandeis, I think it was when Jimmy Carter came to speak about his book. And so there was, like, half the campus was really excited about Jimmy Carter, and half the campus was really angry, and they brought Alan Dershowitz. So then half the campus was really angry at Alan Dershowitz, and the other half was really happy. And they spoke on the same day in the same room, but not to each other. So Jimmy Carter came in, and it was a packed event, and I actually really appreciate everyone came in and afforded him the respect of being a former president of the United States. Stood and applauded when he entered, sat quietly and listened respectfully, and then asked him really tough questions, like got up and gave him really, really difficult questions. And then he left, and people applauded and were polite, and then Alan Dershowitz came in and did his thing, and people did the same thing, afforded him the respect of a distinguished teacher and professor, and also like challenged him. I thought it was a really great show of what Brandeis has to offer.
Here's an easy question. What makes a successful synagogue in your opinion?
What makes a successful synagogue? I think it's not about numbers necessarily. I think it's about connection between people. I think number one is the rabbi able to form meaningful relationships with people that make them feel like they're heard and understood pastorally, and make them feel like they are held in moments that are difficult. Make them feel like they're connected through the rabbi to other people and also directly to other people. And creating a culture where that is the norm. Like I've heard this taught, Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. People often think it's the rabbi's job to visit the sick. Well, it's the rabbi's job to visit the sick because it's a mitzvah, and the rabbi is living the life of mitzvahs. But it's not for the job. Like, that actually should be something that everyone does. So helping to foster a community where people feel like simcha shel mitzvah, the joy of doing mitzvot, and participating in that. And the rabbi is the sort of exemplar of that, and not the person who's doing it for other people. Right? The rabbi's doing it because they're mentioned doing mitzvahs, and everyone takes that as their model. So I think that's one piece of it. And the other piece is meaning. I think the other piece is bringing Torah, and bringing learning, and bringing seriously deep material that shows that our tradition has things to say about what it means to be alive right now. Has intensely important things to say that are countercultural, that go against the mainstream of this country in many ways, and challenge it, and challenge us, and push us, and make us uncomfortable. I think that's great. I think it's important. And I think it should for adults.